Hello and welcome today to the Christian Construction Podcast. We want you to stay tuned for this important episode when we will discuss the importance of voting. All right, welcome back today here on the Christian Construction Podcast. We do appreciate you tuning in to be a part of this episode. I'm here with Brother Matt. Brother Matt, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. And we're doing a little Sunday afternoon recording.
That's right.
We hadn't done that in a while. And so we're thankful that the Lord's given us an opportunity and a time and place. And normally we're used to running buses. We hadn't done that in quite a few months now. And it's not because we ain't got them. It's because it's just supposedly it's not safe.
They're
there, yeah. And missionaries are still sitting back there. So we've got them. We just haven't been able to run them. It's still real iffy right now as of the time of this recording anyway. And so hopefully, who knows?
Kids wouldn't get COVID on the school bus to school, but they would get it on the bus.
Just like you can only get it. You can only get coronavirus at church. It's the only place where it's sitting at. Brother Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Brother Michael?
I'm doing well. You and Kaylin are not married yet.
Well, no. I spent one night at the house this week. I'm going and I'm washing my own clothes and making my lunches for work tomorrow, and it's exhausting.
Hey,
doing all those things for yourself.
Well, I told you I'd heard him get married. That's a good tax write-off at the end of the year too. My goodness,
is it?
It is. Have a couple youngins, you'll find out.
Missed that.
Oh Lordy. Well, anytime now. I'll just go ahead and line it up. We'll get a justice of the peace. I'm a preacher. I guess I can do it. I reckon. I don't know.
Somebody line her up.
I'm sure our pastor will be okay. Let's just secretively go and perform a ceremony.
I've mentioned it already.
We got the keys to the church right now.
I got the keys to the kingdom and the church.
Wow.
Oh Lord. All right. Enough of that tomfoolery, whoever he is. And let's get into this episode today. We're going to talk about the importance of such a serious subject. Here we are joking. I can't believe you guys wrote me into all this cutting up. We're going to talk about the importance of voting today. And
I think they did it.
I'm pretty sure they did.
They
got
did it.
some not so innocent bystanders who would try their best to make us break character and start cutting up a little too much.
Their fault.
All right, so I want to turn to Romans chapter number 13 and read just a few verses concerning civil government, the powers that be, and things like that. Romans 13, and I'll read just a handful of verses, and then kind of launch out into our thought today. Romans 13, verse number 1, the Bible says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake. For this cause pay ye tribute also, for they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor." I want to stop reading right there. There's so much more that we could say, but in a nutshell, this is a good chapter that represents, I guess, an important a structure or a principle that God lays out, and that is that there is authority. When you read through the Old Testament economy, understand we're not talking about salvation. We are talking about civility and structure in government. And so through the Old Testament and the children of Israel, beginning with just after Moses and them were delivered out of Egypt, there was a structure and a civil government, if you will. There was some good civil laws, moral laws, things like that were put in place. And from that, all down through time and history, there has always been, in some form of capacity, at different places across the world, some form of civil government. There are dictatorships, there are monarchies, there are different things like that, but there has always been, since that time, civil government. And so that's what we're talking about today. It ties in with that, is in order for us to have a civil government, first of all, God has to be the foundation of it, I believe. Secondly, we as Bible believers need to be participants, not just spectators, not just onlookers or observers, but we need to be participants in that process. Now, there are those who would condemn us for having any fabric of patriotism in our preaching or in our beliefs, but the reality is God has given us a country. God has given us a place. Regardless of what anybody says, believes, or teaches, there is a Christian heritage and there is a Christian foundation that was laid for this country to be where it is. America's not in Bible prophecy that we know of. America is not mentioned by name throughout the Scriptures. We understand that. But God has given us a Christian nation. Our forefathers who came to this country set out to have a place where we could have freedom of religion and we could have freedom to worship God. And so that's what we're talking about today. What is it that keeps that happening? Obviously, number one is honoring God, but what's the practical side of it? It's us participating in that civil government. And so today, what we're going to do is we'd like to talk about the importance of the election, the importance of this upcoming election, and then also the importance of voting. For many of you that are watching this right now, it may be too late for you to register to vote. You can. I do know that if you've missed that deadline, you can go to vote. However, that vote wouldn't count unless there come down to what you would call, I guess, a runoff, or if they went into kind of I forget the proper terminology, but if it was a disputed, I guess that's it, a disputed election, then they would bring in those that maybe voted outside of the registering times or got to the party late, so to speak. So it may be too late to do that, but I'm also aware that there are several people who are registered to vote, but they just choose not to go to the poll. They don't go to the absentee, they don't do the early voting, they don't solicit to get a ballot by mail. And we'll say a few things about all those avenues and different ways that you can do that in a few moments. But let me start with saying this. Back in 2015, I guess, our church was part of a movement that we called We Stand With God. Brother Chad Watson, Brother Steve Williamson, and Brother Andy Wells were three pastors who really got under a burden for the condition of our country, and specifically the area that they lived in, the part of South Carolina that they lived in. And so from that, they got several pastors and churches on board. Our pastor, Barry Philbeck, and our church, Love Valley Baptist Church, became a part of that. We were able to be a part of two huge rallies, one on the front court steps, or on the front steps of the Capitol building in Columbia, South Carolina, and then a month and a half later, we were able to have another one on the Halifax Mall, which is the big open grassy area right there at Raleigh in the middle of all the government buildings, both of which were attended by 10,000 plus people and had a great turnout, and in turn had a great effect, I think, in North Carolina on the voter turnout. And so that became something that during that time became near and dear to our pastor's heart, and then to our church. Since then, we've put together registering to vote Sundays. We've put together different times where we have literally in our own city went up to City Hall and for different things and issues that are going on. And so since that time, we've realized the importance of participating in government issues that are going on locally as well as more nationally, such as the presidential election. Let me say this before we kind of open it up and the guys, we start talking about it. But one preacher said it like this: a God-ordained government protects righteousness and punishes rebellion. But a government that is not God-ordained, or a government that has been hijacked by those who are not spiritual or Christians or have any thought of God, it protects the rebels and punishes the righteous, those who are trying to do righteous. And so, with that, I want to turn and just kind of open it up, talk about, we'll just talk about our experience with the importance of, I guess, of voting and registering to vote and all of that, and maybe talk about your experience from 2016. You know, we mentioned that before we come on air about how Donald Trump may have not necessarily been our first choice, but banding together with other people who were part of what the world would consider the evangelical movement, banding together with people and just making a commitment to be in one accord on the vote for the well-being of our country. So maybe talk about that a little bit, Brother Matt, if you want to maybe go back to 2015, leading up to that election in 16, and maybe talk about some of your experience with that.
Well, that was that was my first presidential election to be able to vote in. I remember at the time I was actually still registered, or the only election I voted in before that was in 2014 for senator and whatnot. And my parents had always raised us to understand the importance of it and realize that, it was not just something that we could do, but it was a necessity if we wanted to grow up in a clean America, in a good America. So at that point in time, I'd moved here and actually had to drive back to Murphy just to vote that day, about 3.5 hours back home, because I hadn't changed everything over. So 2016 was my first time voting here in Kings Mountain, Cleveland County. And I would say up until, through the primaries and whatnot, probably my preference was Senator Cruz, Ted Cruz. I supported him all the way through until he dropped out. I believe personally he aligned the closest and still does to what I believe to be right, and I believe that then, still believe that today. However, we were left with who we were left with. Ted Cruz is actually who I voted for in the primaries in 2016, and we were left with Donald Trump. Now, my mindset, honestly, I don't know that I expected him to be as good as he has been. Right. I kind of went into it with the mindset that, more or less better than the alternative.
Yeah.
But I realized the need, not to waste my vote and wanting it to be of use to somebody.
Yeah.
So I believe there's only two options. I believe the same thing this year. There's only two options. You got, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. We hear a lot, and we heard it then and you hear it now. Well, I still have to vote my convictions. Well, if you're honest with yourself, you just don't like Donald Trump, because there's no one closer to your convictions than the Libertarian Party of our people, the people like us. So that was kind of how I got into, or how I come about my decision. Was simply that he was as close as I could get, and really didn't feel like there was any other choice. I would say up until that point, especially with the We Stand With God and whatnot, I probably wasn't as aware, didn't make myself as aware of the issues that we do have with our type of people, our group of people getting out to vote and making it a priority. But statistics don't lie, things, polls and whatnot. Well, the polls do lie, but, statistics, I guess you would call them exit statistics.
Yeah, exit polls.
They can't lie, and they prove that our type of people were the reason that we don't have Hillary Clinton today as our president. Our group of people is the main focus. I think it said that 26% of the voter population is evangelical, and that's what we'd be considered. So that's a big chunk.
Oh yeah.
And it really doesn't doesn't take too many. I think you said earlier, you know, you hear a lot of times, well, I'm only one person. What's one vote matter? But if 55 million people say that, then it turns into a big deal.
That's exactly right. Brother Keith, would you also share kind of your experience from that election and just, you know, briefly go through who you had maybe had in your mind, but then how you come to the conclusion of whoever you voted for? You didn't vote for you voted for Clinton, didn't you?
I ain't done it. I vaguely remember 2016, and just to be honest with you, but I do remember that we actually were so in support of Senator Cruz now.
Yeah.
A lot of the men my age had went to one of his rallies. Well, I can't remember where that was at.
Fort Mill.
Was it in where?
Fort Mill.
Fort Mill.
Fort
yeah.
Mill.
Jim Baker's complex.
That's right.
We've still got pictures and
TL.
stuff. So to say that we were in support, and we, just like Matt said, we felt like if there was somebody that was some like us, that it was you know, Ted Cruz at the time.
Yeah.
As time went on, and we were left with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. I told somebody like this the other day, and I hope that somebody don't tell this is who I'm voting for or who you should vote for, but a party that stands for abortion after 9 months obviously does not line up with somebody like us.
And abortion in any capacity, for that matter.
Right, in any capacity. But
how could you not see it?
Right,
on that?
that's a big telltale sign that party is not. And it's not just in that issue, but it's in every issue.
Sure, yeah.
Is pretty much the exact opposite of the way that I would want to vote. Now, I can remember saying in 2016, well, Donald Trump is going to get us in wars. Very opinionated.
Yeah.
And I can remember thinking, he's good for the economy, but he is going to get us in some wars, and we are going to end up all being drafted, and we're going to fight in wars that we don't need to be in. And in fact, it was quite the opposite. Just like Matt said, I didn't imagine that 4 years later that he would have been as good as he was. But
Sure.
That's just what I can remember from 4 years ago.
My first election I voted in was actually a controversial election. Presidential election was in 2000, and it was George W. Bush against Al Gore. And of course, it was a contested election, and they went through all this deal with a bunch of stuff in Florida, and eventually George W. Bush come out. The Supreme Court ruled that he was the winner of the election. That's how far it went. I thought that would probably be the craziest election in my lifetime. It wasn't, because 2016 or 2015 rolled around, and it got ramped up in a hurry. So I'm like you, man. My first choice was Ted Cruz. But I think even by the time the primaries had rolled around, I had already seen and just felt like Donald Trump was going to be the front runner. And I already felt by that point that he was the only one that could beat whoever the Democrats,
Right. Yeah.
you know, especially they had pretty much handpicked and made sure that Hillary was going to be their pick, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think even by that point, as much as I'm like you, I liked Ted Cruz, but even by the primaries, I'd already felt like Donald Trump was going to be the best choice. A lot of people say, well, how can you, again, vote your convictions, and how can you vote for somebody that's done this, this, and this? The statement that I think a lot of people miss that needs to be heard is we are not voting on a pastor. We are voting for a president. Right. That man is not perfect. That man is far from we would break fellowship with people over a whole lot less than some of the stuff that he's been guilty of in his personal life. But however, I feel the same way that you men said, you know, I was worried about what would happen, but when I looked at the alternative, there was no other choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine how far deeper our country would have sunk into socialism and no telling what else.
Well, I don't think anything that Hillary would have done could have surprised us. You know, we knew what we was getting, and we knew. Honestly, I went into that sort of thinking, I don't know what he's going to do.
Right.
But I don't
But we knew what she was going to do.
Right. I don't suspect it could be anywhere nearly as bad as what she's going to do. Because, you made that statement, you know, you was talking about voting on a president, not a pastor. Well, you know, the man's married 3 times. You know, he got dirty language. There's a lot of things that personally I'd have nothing to do with him.
Yep.
But I know one thing. I'm 24, almost 25 years old, and he's the best president I've had in my lifetime.
Absolutely.
By far. It's not even close.
Agreed.
Let me go over a couple things real quick. So one of the things we wanted to kind of point the attention to was voter turnout, okay? I'm just going to throw some percentages at you. So this is something we pulled off a website. And up until 1828, there was no voter turnout data. From 1828, beginning there was 57% turnout. Then 1832 was 55%. 1836 was 57%. And from there, at beginning in 1840, and we're talking about the presidential election, beginning in 1840, the turnout was 80%, then 78, 72, 69, 78, 81, 73, 78, 71, 81, 79, 77, 79. And these percentages carry all the way up into the 1900 presidential election of staying in the mid to high 70s and even over 80% a few times. But when you get to 1904, the voter turnout is 65% of our country. So there's a 35% of people who are voter age, part of that voter age population that were not voting at all. And from there, it never goes above 65% again. Matter of fact, after you get past the 1904 and 1908 election, it never goes above 62% again from then to now, if I'm not mistaken. When you come all the way up to the 2016 election, you'll find that only 55% of the 250 million Americans went out to the polls. Now, to give you an idea of how important it is, in the 2012 election, which was Obama's election to his second term against Mitt Romney, there was a 54% turnout. There were 129,000 people, or 129 million people came out to vote, but there was another 114 million people that didn't. It was said that there were 55 million evangelicals, which is all of us people of faith thrown into one basket. 50 to 55 million evangelicals that did not vote in that election. Coincidentally or not coincidentally, that was the difference between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama in that election. And so, needless to say, that in that election, when people of faith should have been getting out to the polls, we didn't. We didn't go to the polls. We didn't care enough to go vote. And because of that, we got 4 more years of Barack Obama. On the flip side of that, that might have been the best thing that could have happened moving forward, because I think it got the attention of America that we were going even further down, of Christians in America anyway, that if we didn't do something or see God do something, we were going to go down even further. And so we did see about a 10 million person increase in voting from between 2012 to 2016. And so these are pretty important numbers. You can look on Wikipedia. You can look on other voter websites or election websites that tell the differences. But the reality is, if we as God's people would just simply get out to vote, there's no telling the difference that would make moving forward, not just in the presidential elections, but in every election.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I remember as we sat around a conference room table in Columbia, South Carolina, week after week after week leading up to the beginning of those We Stand With God rallies, we sat in there, and we had people from different denominations and backgrounds. One was a gentleman by the name of Tommy Kelly, who was, at that time, and may still be, the president of the Southern Baptist Convention in South Carolina. And he said that the amount of people that were in Southern Baptist churches of voter age, that if just they would make it out, of just the Southern Baptist, if just they would have went out to the polls in 2012, Barack Obama wouldn't have won his state. But he said that's how he knew that the not getting to the polls was an issue, or people going to the polls, obviously, and voting for somebody that's not fit to be in office, such as Barack Obama was. And so that's just a few things that we wanted to share with you concerning that. There's approximately 250 million Americans who are of voting age. It is said that 83, now this was as of 4 years ago, I don't have the updated statistics, as of 4 years ago, 83 million of those are evangelicals. Again, as Brother Matt mentioned, that's 25% of our voting population. That's a quarter. And there are more than just Christians or just evangelicals or just church-going or people of faith that vote in the election that will vote for conservative values, whether that's voting on the pocketbook or whether that's voting on other things that affect foreign policies and all of that. And so if just us Christians and people of faith would get to the polls, that's 25% of the battle already won right there.
Yeah. Well, I think, it could be said there's states that, conservative values don't have a chance in. They really are the minority. You think of California, Oregon, Washington, states in the Pacific Northwest, they don't have much of a chance. Right. Now, don't give you any reason not to go out and vote, but the conservative values don't have much of a chance to win. However, in the majority of states, if those that believed conservative values, and when I say conservative values, I'm talking about traditional marriage, pro-life. If those people that believed in that went out and vote, we wouldn't have to have this conversation.
Wouldn't even be close.
It wouldn't be close. It wouldn't be
that.
The election wouldn't. It wouldn't have any. I don't think there would be any discrepancy. It would be clear who the winner's going to be a long time before the election.
Yeah.
And the election would prove that. But that I do believe that's the issue.
Yes.
Is not that the people aren't there. It's getting the people to go and cast their ballot.
So here's the important thing. This is what we want to challenge you with. First of all, we want you to make sure you're registered to vote. And again, at the time this is airing, it's probably past that deadline in most states for you to register to vote. This is what we need you to do. Please take this video, like it, share it, comment on it, review it, like it, subscribe to it, whatever it takes for it to cause you to have it sent out to everybody else. And the reason for that is if other people will see it, some don't even realize these facts and these numbers that we've given. They don't even realize how it ought to be such a no-brainer. But so many believers and Christians and people of faith don't even realize how much we are doing an injustice to our country, to the country that God gave us, to the country that people have bled on foreign soil, died on foreign soil, and gave their lives. And then not to mention the fact of the goodness of God in giving us a free country to be able to live in. So like, share, comment, review, subscribe, whatever you need to do to get this video out to other people. Secondly, please make sure you know where your voting precinct is and where you're voting at. And then encourage others, your family members, your children, your grandchildren, your mom and dad, your aunts and uncles. Encourage them to get out to vote. Listen, it looks, when you watch the news, it looks like, man, these people are taking over our country and they're burning down buildings and they're tearing down stuff and they're knocking down monuments in the Capitol and they're knocking down statues and they're not just doing it literally, they're doing it figuratively. They're knocking down morals and structure and freedom and all of this stuff. They're knocking it down. But I'm convinced that they are not the majority. And until we get out and let our voice be heard by going to the polls, then they're going to continue to go and to move forward, and they're going to progress. They're going to be progressive. I'm so against that, I wouldn't even have progressive insurance. I'm telling you, I'm against that whole outfit of having anything to do with that. Until we get out and let our voice be heard and let them know, hey, we didn't have time to go out and march in the streets and burn down buildings and loot hardworking people's stores because we were too busy tying up our boots every day and getting on the job and building this country the way God intended for it to be built. Until we get out and do that, these things are going to continue to happen. Yep. So when you go to the polls, when you on election day or absentee vote or whatever, get to the polls, vote. I mean, make it known that you voted. Make sure your family knows. Drill it in your children, the importance of it. And it may take a couple of election cycles for them to really get a hold of it, but make sure your children get to the polls. Stress the importance of them getting out to the polls as well. Brother Keith, you have anything else to add?
I just going to stress again that I believe that it is a responsibility. Everybody wants to claim a right as long as it's good for them. They want to claim, I have gun rights because I can put a gun up in my house. I can carry a gun, but just as much as I can do that, I have a right and a responsibility to vote. Right. My brother is in the Army, and I think about him. If it was him who died so that I could have a right to vote. Yeah. And then I take advantage of that, and I'd sit at home on November the 3rd. If it was me, I would be mad at that person that decided I'm not going to do that. And then somebody, I can imagine that it's been said or thought, I'm just one voice, I'm just one vote, I'm just one. But if our pastor was discouraging votes, and he's not, he is absolutely not. Right. But if that's 300 in our county, and so you may just be one, but if 500 ones decide that they're not going to go because I'm just one, then that's 500 votes, and it's liable to make a huge difference. Yeah.
Keith pointed out something that literally exactly what I was going to say to finish. One thing that has been on my heart strongly, and is this fact: don't take for granted your position of leadership.
That's right.
Yeah. So I've seen
as a husband, as a spiritual leader, anything.
If you start from pastors, or I've seen so many on social media, I've talked to many guys at work that will get this mindset of my vote don't matter. It's, the lesser of two evils. That's something some people say. Whatever your reasoning is, if you're not going to vote, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
What
Matter
I'm getting
you
at,
should keep it to yourself.
Right.
We don't want to hear you cry about it.
Don't give anybody a reason. If you're a pastor, all it takes is one statement in opposition. Maybe you have something that I seen. A lot of people had an issue with how the debate went with President Trump. That's fine if you got an issue with it, but everybody ain't got to know about it, because there's people that follow every one of us, whether you're a father, whether you're a husband, whether you're a man, whatever there's somebody that's looking up to you, and all it takes is one phrase for them to say, well, I guess it don't matter if I go either. Yeah. I guess my vote don't make no difference either. Yeah. Or, there really ain't no one that I care to vote for, so there ain't nobody I want to support. And you may not even have any intention whatsoever of putting that in somebody's mind, and you might still go vote, but you might make a difference in somebody else's mindset.
That's right. There was 55 million ones who said my vote don't matter in 2012, and that was the difference in the election that particular year. Get out, vote, go to the polls. This is not just your right, but it's your responsibility to get out and exercise our freedom. It's our freedom and our responsibility to do that. So we want you to do that. We encourage you to do that. Please give us some feedback. Send us a message. Send us an email, anything like that. And please, again, be sure to like, share, comment, review this episode. You'll never know who, if you share this video, you'll never know who will see it, that it will cause them to realize this is a pretty big deal. It's important. And so we ask you to do that. Please come in and be a part of the podcast next week. We're going to deal with something very important as well next week. We're going to talk about a subject, a topic that is very pressing in our day, a day when most people think that it's hopeless to live, that there's nothing to live for. And so we're going to address a very important issue next week, the topic of suicide. This is something that has touched and affected the life of nearly every individual on planet Earth today. And so we want you to tune in next week. Thank you for tuning in this week. We hope you'll come back and be a part here on the Christian Construction Podcast.